Well, hey there, and welcome to episode number 36 of Metal Raps. My name is Mitch Joel, and as always, we are joined by Talking Metal's Mark Strigl. Mark, how are you?
Good, Mitch. How you doing?
Good, thanks. And of course, we are also with One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon. Hello, other Mitch.
Other Mitch is here, ready for duty. Good day, everybody.
How are you guys doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
I spent my time tearing through the Sebastian Bach autobiography. This is a book, I mean, Mitch, you'd know better than I would, that has been sort of talked about. It's been years that he's been talking about this book coming. Am I right or wrong on that?
Oh, no, you're very right. I think it's been like 6 or 7 years in the making, but okay. I think the ego on the manifest was so big that they couldn't get it through the publisher's door, so it got delayed a little bit.
The book is called 18 in Life on Skid Row. Am I the only one who read it? Everyone else just sort of caught stuff online, or?
Yeah, I've been catching stuff online, and I'm curious to hear from you. How is this book?
So let's sort of set the table a little bit here. One is huge Skid Row fan from before day one when there was buzz about them to literally I'm one of those guys who would drive across the Canadian border to the U.S. when you were allowed to do that. Apparently we can't do that anymore. Just kidding.
Right.
And because albums back then came out sometimes weeks or months before they were released in Canada. The debut came out on Atlantic, drove all the way down to either Plattsburgh, New York, or Burlington, Vermont. A huge fan of the band, really from day one. And then, again, I thought Slave to the Grind to this day, an amazing album. I could listen to it without tire, top to bottom. I was really sort of, I think it's over when he left the band. And I know that we've gone back and forth over the course of these shows talking about other singers. To me, Skid Row really is, that voice. It was a hard book to read.
Right.
It was, I guess I didn't see the ego or know the ego so much. But, I got to tell you, he hardly mentions the other guys in the band and anything around how the band was formed, what the formative years were like, was all about him or a moment he had. I think that I was over 2/3 of the way through the book, and he mentioned Scotty Hill, and in brackets it said, the guitarist or something like that.
Right.
It's like one of those things where you're like, so for me it was really disappointing because the crux and the energy was spent on things that weren't necessarily Skid Row. And listen, he's done so much after that from Broadway and all this solo stuff, and he should be proud. But I was really hoping that you would just sort of feel like you were really in those moments of what it was like to be that band and to be all for one, one for all. And it just really wound up being a bunch of sort of pieced together. It was fun, on the other hand, because you really are sort of going back in time and thinking about the tours they were on, bands they were playing with, and stuff that happened with Bon Jovi and Motley Crue, and his relationship with Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses. And there is stuff in there. It's not like it's vapid, but it was just – it's almost like I wish he would just allow – his ego to get out of the way and tell some of the stories better. And it's sort of, by the end I was just like, okay, we get it. And by the way, the best part of this book is all he talks about, not all, but there's a lot of lots of cocaine use, and it always ends with, and that's why I never do cocaine. In the next chapter, it's like, and I'm doing cocaine again. You're just
right.
At one point, you're like, what? So it's just a lot of sort of stuff like that by the end, I sort of was unfortunately rolling my eyes more than sort of feeling like, wow, that was a great moment in time with some great music.
It's interesting because that you say that, and I have to wonder if the book company pushes him in that direction, or if it truly is just his ego, because when you were talking, I immediately thought of Ozzy Osbourne's book, where Zakk Wylde is mentioned in one paragraph in this 600-page book or whatever, 400-page book, and that's it. And then Stephen Pearcy's book, which I also really, really enjoyed both of these books, but Warren DeMartini barely even mentioned in the entire book. So. And the behind the scenes stuff on making the albums and and the details that like music nerds like ourselves would want to know, just really not there at all in those two books I mentioned. So it makes me wonder if these guys get pushed in a direction to make it more gossipy and tabloidy and not so much about the inner workings of the band.
It's funny because it's sort of like a weighting, though, right? Like when I think about the book, I feel like there was more guts, rawness, and honesty around Broadway than there was around, let's call it, the first three Skid Row albums.
Okay.
And that's where it's disappointing because you want to have. I get where he's going, and I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to show a body of work. He had to move on after Skid Row. There's a lot of stuff there. I also wish that I think people would say he did wear his heart on his sleeve about how he felt about the band and he wants to get back together. But I don't know. And to speak to what you were saying, Mark, I'm not so sure, right? Like the questions I always have is how much of it was him sort of talking on the phone to somebody who transcribed this and wrote a book in a proper voice and blah, 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 versus, let's say, a Bruce Springsteen biography, which whether you're a fan or not, you could just, when you read the book, you can hear it's him speaking.
Right.
And so there's a lot of stuff that, again, maybe I'm a bit jaded because I've written two books too, where I wanted so much more. And again, you can't even compare it to something like, The Dirt or even the craziness that was David Lee Roth's biography.
Right. Okay.
Mitch, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just wanting to know, does he offer a mea culpa in terms of what happened with Skid Row, or does he explain it in detail as this is why we haven't spoken in 15, 20 years? Or is it just like, hey, I'm great and whatever. I mean, is there anything of substance?
Not really. And it even seems vague as to why it happened and why certain members refuse to talk to other members. Not even real clarity on who those members might be. So I didn't feel like there was this sort of definitive moment either where it was like this happened and three sofas went out a hotel window. It was sort of very, the fact that I don't recall should say it all, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah. Listen, in terms of those kind of tell-all books, I have a general disinterest in all of them because I never find them to be authentic or most of these guys were on drugs, they were on alcohol, blah, blah, they can't remember, so they make up this fictionalized version of what happened because it suits them best. So
but there's enough stories about things that happened in the studio, what the band was like in the early days. I mean, it was interesting hearing about his family, and so there is. I don't want to make this all doom and gloom. It's a fun read. If you like the band, you'll get some kicks on it. I just, again, it's sort of one of those things where some people are like, oh, you didn't know Sebastian Bach has a huge ego, and in my brain, I was like, no, I just, he's a front man, a loud front man. I just didn't know it was like that, considering what Skid Row was.
Right.
Sort of reinforcing how many albums they sold and stuff. As they were a big band for sure, but again, they weren't Ozzy, they weren't Van Halen, they were Motley Crue. They did really well, as it goes. But Mark, you had mentioned Ozzy's biography, which I think makes the perfect segue to. Yes. There's some stuff happening now with Sabbath coming to the end.
Final
of
show, February 4th, the final show, back where it all began, Birmingham, England. Supposedly the final show. We'll see, but we've been psyched out by Ozzy numerous times before. Going all the way back to what was the No More Tours tour. What was that, like 94, 95?
92, 93, wasn't it?
Was it that early? Okay. Yeah.
Well, I think it was, but I mean, listen, we've had all these tours from Kiss farewell to Thunder farewell to The Who farewell to Ozzy farewell to the Scorpions. I mean, it's the running gag in the business. Now, to be fair, they say it's the final show in Birmingham as part of the tour. I think when you look at bands, you have to look at the semantics, and they're talking about final tour. They're not talking about final show. I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or two we see a one-off or a 50th anniversary show or some kind of special event. I just don't buy that it's forever and always goodbye. as long as the members are alive.
There has been
Rush sort of did that, right? Rush said that we are not going to tour anymore the way we have, but there might be. So this is the last tour, and again, you're right. It's sort of like you sort of got to look at it sideways. Whenever it's the last show, the tour, the last tour for this tour is the last. Like it's like the whole.
I don't know if you want to call it being cynical or call it being smart, but we've seen so many examples of people saying it's the last blah, 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 blah. And then you go, right, but we didn't say it was the last show. We said it was the last tour. And you go, oh, all right, sure. And so I don't buy it. I'm sure if, they are called to, sing at the Olympics, they'll go, oh, okay. I mean, I see that coming up.
There has been certain things that they've stated, not recently, but in the past, that this is it. This is absolutely the final Black Sabbath show, and they will not play again. However, then more recently, we had Tony Iommi say something in the press saying, well, it'd be nice to do, another show down the road at some point, or he said something similar to that. So that made me kind of scratch my head, because I was pretty convinced that this Birmingham show on the 4th would be the final show ever. But after that Iommi comment, I'm not so convinced after all.
It's the final show in Birmingham ever.
Right. Okay. All right.
Maybe of a tour.
Right. Of a tour. Right.
Of the end tour, not of the farewell tour, of the end tour. No.
Right.
But with that, we're also already hearing that Ozzy's going out solo this summer.
Yeah, I mean, he's
what I'm hearing.
Well, I don't think that's been confirmed.
I mean, he's got the. Well, we don't know if he's doing a tour, but we know that he's on festival dates. There are at least 2 festival dates in Chicago, and the other one I forget is Wisconsin or something. So we know there's 2 shows. So he's doing shows. We know that.
Right.
Is it a tour? We don't know.
And
there's also.
He has stated that there has been comments. I think he stated that there will be. He does plan to do new original music too at some point, that he's not through recording as Ozzy Osbourne.
And there's also rumors of guitar players, which is always a thing with Ozzy, like who's going to be in the band, who's going to be playing guitar. And I heard a rumor. Mark, you'll hear a rumor?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing about that, there's a lot, and I mean, I think it's a lot of wishful thinking by people like me, but there is chatter that wow, Zach, wouldn't it be great to get him in the band again? And there was a curious thing that happened last Friday. Ozzy always does these flashback Friday photos. And, right after I was reading on some message board about this rumor, sure enough, Ozzy's official, I believe it was the Twitter account or maybe Instagram or something, put out a picture, a Flashback Friday picture of course, Zach and Ozzy on stage, which was all I needed to think, wow, this is happening. Of course, that's probably just wishful thinking on my part, but hey, I mean, I think it would be, in this post-Sabbath world, that would be a great little treat for us to get a guy like Zach back in the fold with Ozzy, and I think it would add some excitement to it. I know for me personally, it would mean that maybe I want to go see 2 or 3 shows on the tour instead of just one. I mean, I think Zach back in the fold would be great. And one of the reasons Zach fell out of favor with Ozzy was sober, or at least trying to stay sober, and Zach wasn't at the time. And he even, I think, hints at this in his book, that's one of the reasons why Zach didn't remain in the band. I think he wanted a sober band around him. So, but Zach, of course, has now been sober for a number of years. So, why not? I think the time is ripe. I think the time is perfect for Zach.
I think if they do that, you need Mike Borden and Inez back to make it sort of that no more tours tour lineup. That would be kind of fun. Now, on my end, I interviewed Gus G recently, of course, who was Ozzy's guitarist and in Firewind, and I said, hey, are you still in the band? And he said, you'd have to ask Ozzy, not me. I have no idea. So, I don't know. Are the hints there? Could be. Would be.
I don't know. As a guy who loves the musicianship of all of those guys, I think, give me Geezer and Gus G. I'm good with that. I think you're right. Give me a Mike. Inez or Inez, give me a. I mean, Zach for sure. Zach's sound was just so complimentary. And as you were telling the story, Mark, I was reminded. I think there are some anecdotes in the Sebastian Bach book about that era of Ozzy and Zach too. So it sort of speaks to that exact issue as well. So look, we got to see what Ozzy does. What Ozzy does. Right. Ozzy does shows as Ozzy does. He tours as Ozzy does. So we'll see. I'll be curious to see after the end of the summer what he's saying about Ozzy and Black Sabbath, because I also get the feeling that towards the end of Ozzy's stuff, even when he does solo, it always seems like he's